Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ideas and Trends 2021, presented by the Business Leadership Center within the Buccino Leadership Institute. At the very beginning of this project, we were asked by Professor Shannon to essentially predict the future and what the world would look like in 2030. How are you supposed to know what's going to happen in the world 10 years from now if we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow? There was a lot of confusion and debate on how to even start tackling this tall task. With the journey across 8 months of research, every single member of our class was tested in ways that we never experienced before. We hit many road bumps and struggled a lot, and after testing out numerous approaches, we decided to build our project around our collective experience and the issues we believe will affect our future the most. Megatrends are powerful, transformative forces that could change the global economy, business, and society, and will continue to do so for centuries. Moreover, these megatrends are structural shifts that are longer term in nature and have irreversible consequences for the world around us. Think AI, automation, and technological breakthrough. The impacts of these megatrends are creating a dangerous chain of generational turmoil, further hindering the way we communicate. In the age of technology where interacting with one another is easier than ever, there are still several components of modern society that lead to lapses in communication. This begins as early as childhood, through the installment of entitlement, continues on through the stage of each of our own mental healths, and then translates to societal inefficiencies and political polarizations. As you will see, this chain of reactions is displayed through our hourglass model. With the progression of this model, entitlement, mental health, inefficiency, and political incivility all flow towards one common underlying factor: a lapse in communication. In order to properly address the impact of these megatrends, this must be corrected. Likewise, starting with the issue of participation trophy philosophy, you will now see how the lack of meaningful communication due to societal gridlock and entitlement has limited our levels of efficiency and future potential.
Is there a line where someone becomes so compassionate for others that they actually become detrimental to that individual's success? The answer appears to be definitively yes, and unfortunately, we're seeing it take place in innumerable occasions, particularly during the most critical and formative years of adolescence. Much to the chagrin of many caring soccer moms and dads everywhere, we're talking about the ever so controversial participation trophy, and how it's one of the many examples of detrimental philosophy that seems to have started entire generations off on the wrong foot and helped lead to this egregious lapse in communication. Let me further explain. We are seeing countless young people, intelligent, caring, good people, who have one fatal flaw that has proven to be cancerous to the successful approach of not only communication, but life in general. That flaw? Entitlement. Millennials and Gen Z have been learning a borderline malevolent lesson since their youth. No matter what, you are a winner. It seems like a kind thing to tell a kid at first glance, but it could actually be unintentionally very damaging. An Ohio State study led by an expert in the field suggests that constant praise for our kids' tiniest accomplishments may have unintended side effects that create an overinflated ego. And this can have serious consequences both in childhood and later on in life. Now, what are those serious consequences? Well, we see them every day. The younger generations of Americans have had to face little to no failure, dissent, nor criticism since a young age. Their actions were flawless. Everyone grew up winners. Traditional discipline has fallen to the wayside in favor of excessive positive reinforcement. This branches out of sports and into education rapidly, leading to the elimination of things such as simple grading rubrics and grade-based reading levels in countless school districts. These changes are happening in both rubrics and grade level reading standards simply because they are seen as too harsh or too unkind to children who may have not met the standards for one reason or another. This has led to a group of young adults who are severely under-equipped to handle any significant level of serious discourse or challenging conversation. The inherent reaction of millennials and Gen Z alike to hearing a dissenting opinion is to dismiss the other idea entirely. Silence it if you can, and condemn them to some sort of monster for even considering questioning your own opinions. As it turns out, if we tell a child their whole youth that they can do no wrong and that they are always perfect, they might just believe you. we create a vast population of people who believe themselves omniscient and immutable. No wonder why we see a stalemate in our national discourse. No one is ready to face the legitimate rational discourse needed in this country because conflict has been severed out of the adolescent experience. Being competitive is not taught as a virtue, but instead a sin to be stomped out and repressed. Don't be tough. Don't think for yourself. Don't try to become better than your peers. Everyone is the same and you should be content where you are. It's easier to go with the flow. It's abhorrent, damaging, and wrong. Not only is failure, disappointment, and pain not something to be protected against in youth, it's something that needs to be actively sought out. When the stakes are as low as a 6-year-old soccer game or elementary school classroom, it's an absolute waste not to teach what disappointment and failure feels like then and there. One cannot learn from their mistakes if they never recognize they made one. They cannot get back up if they never fell down. Kids will never get such a non-consequential chance to learn the lesson in their adult life, and we are setting them up to be woefully underprepared to do so when they inevitably do. Simply put, this trend of non-communication comes from a simple place. The younger generations have not had to face the personal responsibility for being wrong, for failing, for underachieving. We nail this in children's head from an early age and then wonder why it shows up in their adulthood. If we want to see cultural change and growth in communication, we must stop coddling. No more helicopter parents, no more participation trophies, no more kind grading methods. Let kids fail and let them fail hard. It is the most positive experience towards their personal growth that they can get. If we want to move into the future with any hope of productive discourse that actually generates improvements to society, we must make this change so that people can forge their own paths towards leadership and growth.
Case Western Reserve University researchers discovered entitlement may lead to chronic disappointment, unmet expectations, and a habitual self-reinforcing cycle of behavior. First, entitlement creates constant vulnerability to unmet expectations. Unmet expectations then lead to dissatisfaction and other volatile emotions. Our next group talks about mental health in our society and the solutions available today.
Have you been feeling out of sync, tired, and stuck in a routine? Do you find that your screen time has increased tremendously during the recent pandemic, scrolling aimlessly through social media for hours at a time?
This is something that many people are experiencing. It's been said a million times, but it's worth remembering that although we are technically more connected than ever, there's actually a huge disconnect between people. It becomes easy to think that the most volatile and toxic corners of the internet are reality if you never leave the perspective of social media.
Screen time and social media use correlate with mental health issues. With the rising popularity of social media, depression, low self-esteem, and loneliness are becoming increasingly common in teens. According to Mental Health in America, 9.7% of youth have serious major depression.
These problems often go under-addressed. When you aren't in a mentally healthy space, it's harder to effectively communicate with others. You are not capable of being the best version of yourself, and by letting these problems go unsolved, you inflict even more damage upon not only yourself, but also those around you. If you want to be able to effectively communicate and potentially handle these world-changing problems like climate change, AI, and automation, then you need to be able to address some of the biggest problems at home first, and that starts with your mental health.
With AI taking over job markets, anxiety could become more prevalent as workers try to find steady work. Major employers such as Walmart and Amazon are rebranding their brands and menial jobs aren't in the picture. With a surge in e-commerce and advances in automation being the hot topics, the era of jobs for life is going outdated.
With all the uncertainties in the world, it's important to find the resources to help you handle these mental health issues. Many people fear a stigma of having to face these problems head on, but I implore you to remember that you are not alone. Millions of Americans speak to professionals about their mental health issues, and with modern technologies, you won't even have to leave your home to do so. Speaking to a professional, even just to try it out, can prove to be a very effective tool in tackling these problems.
About 75% of people who enter psychotherapy show some benefit from it. One psychotherapy session has been shown to improve emotions and behavior to be linked with positive changes in the brain and body. The benefits also include fewer sick days, less disability, fewer medical problems, and increased work satisfaction. With the ever-change in the world that we live in, counseling has grown along with technology. Resources such as telemedicine, digital therapy, sensors and wearables, electronic health records, and even virtual reality have evolved to support mental health practices. Obviously, this is not a process that occurs overnight. A majority of people did find relief through these methods, but as with all things, it takes time to find what works best.
If you are not in a mentally healthy place, you are not in a position to communicate effectively. It is no coincidence that as we see this stark increase in mental illness, we also see this lapse in communication. Although it's grueling work, facing these mental health issues head on and resolving them within yourself sets you up much better for communication in the future.
Without strong mental health, our society's inefficiencies are worsened. Our next group will discuss the inefficiencies throughout the different sectors of our world today.
When talking about inefficiencies, people almost always resort to numbers and economics to find the solution. But not every inefficiency has to do with money. There are also social inefficiencies that hurt national unity, exacerbate interpersonal animosity, and increase discrimination. All of which, yes, end up hurting the economy too. With rapid changing times ahead, it's important to understand the social drawbacks from economic decisions and economic drawbacks from social decisions. The two main social inefficiencies that inhibit growth are the media and government.
Companies and influencers are always telling the public what they think they need. Designer boots, a new car, or luxury clothing, none of which contributes to long-term well-being. Ad agencies have been promoting superfluous luxuries instead of the benefits from the middle and low-income individuals, investments towards financial security, retirement funds, or children's college education. Along with preying on the susceptible, the media also targets people who get comfortable with their own ideas. The media will feed people content that they like and block out all the contradicting opinions. AI furthers the problem by suggesting material the viewer is likely to agree with and hiding everything else. This lethal combination drives people down rabbit holes where people believe in polar opposites. It's hard to find any common ground with people who have not been fed the same information. When people hate others solely for the political views, it makes it hard to form unity.
The media is not the sole contributor to the growing inefficiencies around the world. Too many times politicians place their own agenda above the well-being of everyone else and use the other side as a scapegoat. When politicians separate and stereotype people, it is almost impossible to get anything done. Gridlock and red taping are prominent causes of the inefficiency. If the government cannot act cohesively, then the large conundrums we face will not be solved. And as a result, partisan disagreements will occur. Showing the smallest amount of cooperation, even if it helps everyone, would be a sign that the other side is right and that your own side is wrong. That's why so many times government employees would prefer to shut down the government than compromise.
While these are some prevalent communication inefficiencies in our public sector, we are also witnessing inefficiencies in our private sector.
Beyond this, the American population has a problem with the spending for higher education.
Higher education's portion of the United States GDP is the largest among the nations, but it is also the most inefficient, with a 16% efficiency rate of degree attainment to degree spending. With the combination of poor spending and lackluster results, job attainment will be more difficult, thus creating economic issues on par with the 2008 recession. Trade connections between the United States and China may be expanded upon the new leadership, considering that globalization and stronger trade ties will alleviate the markets and make for more fluid transactions, according to macroeconomist Jake Werner.
There are other areas of the world with poor infrastructure and efficiency. In the United States, infrastructure is resource inefficient, which is a result of the poor resource management that drives costs up and creates infrastructure that is 30 years behind, currently requiring $2 trillion in investments by the year 2025 for current repairs and maintenance. Not only is this fiscally irresponsible, but a waste of time. With production that is accelerated at abnormal paces to maintain outdated infrastructure, this is a waste of jobs and engineering power, and potentially hazardous for the future.
2030 has to be ready for the communication gap the media and government are creating. If something is not done to slow the progression of divisiveness, the US and other countries will continue to be drawn closer and closer to civil war. Powerful people and companies must speak out against the growing tension and focus on advocating for reliable politicians, providing honest and unbiased news, and transparent marketing.
With this inefficiency comes an overlap into political discourse where we continue to see inefficiencies as a result of even further lapses of communication.
Our world is more divided now than ever. it's an understatement to say that we are ill-equipped to address these pressing trends that dominate many of our decisions of the future. These deep-rooted divides in our country and across the world have made it nearly impossible to make important conversations about these trends about anything more than winning or being right. How are we supposed to talk about the impacts of the development of AI on our job market when we are deep into our emotions to have difficult conversations with those who disagree with us? How do we get to a place where it is socially acceptable to basically exile someone from society, aka cancel them, due to an opinion that doesn't align with the masses on Twitter? In terms of what the world will look like in 2030, it may not be so pretty if we don't make some cultural changes to address some of our intense division.
So how exactly did we get here? Part of the answer to that question is in everyone's pockets right now. No, this isn't going to be some rant about how cell phone usage is destroying all of us. It is, however, going to be a look at what may be behind the ever-growing division in our world today. When we hear about much of the divisive drama that goes on the internet today, it's mostly traced back to social media. Who posted this on Facebook, who posted this on Twitter, and who's arguing about who unfriended who based on who they voted for. The anonymity of social media lets people behave in ways that they never would in normal face-to-face conversations. People are able to say hurtful things and willingly start arguments with strangers without even telling them their full name. It is common to see people recruiting others to their sides to start arguments with people on different social media sites. This only adds to the problem by increasing the amount of people arguing who are all bringing different perspectives to the table. Of course, considering and listening to different perspectives is a good thing, but when debate becomes emotional argument, the appreciation of listening to different perspectives is replaced with animosity. According to the Pew Research Center, as of 2019, 72% of US adults reported having at least one social media account. According to Statista, 3.6 billion people worldwide used social media in 2019. They project that number to skyrocket to 4.41 billion by 2025, and by 2030, they're projecting almost our entire population to be on some form of social media. This data gives you an insight to how social media affects and influences the lives of everybody. Social media also affects the way people receive information. And speaking of information, a Microsoft study showed that the average attention span of American adults has decreased to around 8 seconds. This decrease in attention span can be possibly attributed to just the sheer amount of information that we received on a daily basis through social media and the internet. 8 seconds is just about enough time to read a news headline, so who needs the whole article? The combination of social media anonymity and the decrease of attention span and the type of information that people are bringing to the table has increased overall divisiveness and decreased political civility in today's world.
Now that we examined how we might have gotten here, let's take a closer look at what this divisiveness looks like. Starting with one of the most polarizing events in recent history, divisiveness was on full display in the November United States presidential election, not helped at all by the fact that the US had a two-party system. The presidential race between incumbent President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden truly split the nation in half, which is somewhat normal for the United States to have a closely contested election. What isn't normal is the way that each political party views members of the opposing party. According to Pew Research Center, around 89% of Trump supporters and 90% of Biden supporters believe the opposing candidate would do lasting harm to the US if they were elected.
An article in The Atlantic by Yasha Monk discusses a fascinating new study called the Perception Gap. This study determined how Democrats and Republicans see each other, and ultimately determined that the parties' opposing viewpoints of each other are based on a caricature. When asked during the study, Democrats guessed that only half of Republicans thought that immigration strengthened America as long as it is, quote, properly controlled. In actuality, 9 in 10 Republicans agreed with that statement. On the other hand, when asked to guess how many Democrats were, quote, proud to be American, Republicans guessed that about half were proud to be American. In reality, more than 4 in 5 Democrats were, quote, proud to be American. These examples, among others, show that mutual hatred between the parties are based on stereotypes and misperceived viewpoints. Interestingly, the study also found that more educated and politically interested Americans were more likely to perpetuate these stereotypes and vilify the opposing party. Those Americans misinterpret the opposing party's viewpoint 20% more than Americans who don't follow politics on a regular basis and aren't as educated. So at the end of the day, what can we do about this? Our answer is simple, but also extremely complicated. Culture change through better communication. It's clear that we've reached a point in our world today where to even entertain the fact that the opposing viewpoint may have some validity is immediately met with insults and outrage. This has to change. We need to change the culture of our world to become more open-minded and tolerant of differing viewpoints. As we mentioned earlier, How are we going to have a discussion about these megatrends that are affecting the futures of all of us if we can't even have a civil discussion about them? Improving communication is the first step that we all need to take. In a recent article titled "Welcome to the Fractured States," CNN writes that the first crucial step in healing our divide is, quote, daring to engage with those who disagree. The article also references filmmaker Ken Burns' opinion that we have to engage in conversation and resist the temptation that, quote, the other side lives in an alternate universe. Burns also says that, quote, it is the diversity of our experiences that creates something new and better, something even more American. Lastly, we would like to reference some advice on changing our culture through better communication from two Connecticut state politicians from opposing parties. Representatives Sean Scanlon, a Democrat, and Vincent Candelora, a Republican, recently held a Zoom conversation titled Restoring Political Civility. During the conversation, they discussed a gun bill that they helped get through the Connecticut Congress that received the most bipartisan support for a gun bill in state legislation history. They also talked about the importance of taking the temperature down and having civil conversations with those you disagree with. Scanlon mentioned a great analogy that we would like to echo. He talked about growing up as a Yankees fan and how he hated to see the Yankees players interacting with the Red Sox players before a rivalry game. He would yell at his TV and ask, "How could you talk with the enemies like that?" Scanlon said that as he matured, he realized that the fans perpetuate the rivalry and that the players don't really hate each other. He concluded saying, quote, "We have a lot of fans in this world today, fans of the game that is politics." The relationship between Scanlon and Candelora is one that we should all strive to achieve. They represent what we can accomplish if we strive for better communication and more open-mindedness in our personal, professional, and social lives. In order to address these pressing trends, it is absolutely imperative that the world tries to heal this deep divide and that all the fans root for the same team for once.
As explained, our society's lapse in understanding and communication that arises from the affirmation of ideas has weakened our ability to address the impacts of the megatrends that most impact our future. Our hourglass model demonstrates how the lapse in communication is what prohibits us from addressing the megatrends. In order to fix our communication issues, we must improve on entitlement in the youth, mental health, inefficiencies, and political civility. Only upon doing so would we be able to have the most impactful approach to handle the megatrends most prevalent in our society. On behalf of Ideas and Trends 2021, thank you. We would also like to thank Ruchin Consul and Professor Shannon for their valuable feedback and guidance. Lastly, a special thank you to Peter Cologne for the video production.